Hey there, and thanks for joining today's session, introducing the SUSE Enterprise Storage 7 beta program. Presenting today are T.R. Bosworth, Vincent Moutoussamy, and Kai Wagner. Before we do get started, I'd like to quickly cover a few housekeeping items. Today's presentation will last about 45 minutes with a Q&A at the end. If you have any questions, please submit them at any time during the webinar. We will be recording the webinar and sharing the link roughly 24 hours after this session. And now, without further ado, let's get started. Handing over to you guys.
Okay, thank you very much. Hi there, this is T.R. Bosworth. I'm one of the senior product managers for SUSE Enterprise Storage, and I want to tell you about our new beta program for SUSE Enterprise version 7. Just a little bit of background. I'm located in East Tennessee. You can see some of my interests there. I like craft beer, running, traveling. I've been around in computing for quite a while. So let Vincent and Kai introduce themselves. Vincent?
Hello. Yes. So I'm the beta program project manager at SUSE from the SUSE R&D department. I'm located in France, and basically what you need to know about me is really that I'm the administrator of all SUSE beta program, and I will try to support you throughout the storage beta program, of course, but also other SUSE beta program. Kai?
Yeah, hello everyone. This is Kai speaking. I'm the product owner for the SUSE Enterprise Storage product. I'm located in Germany, more specific, almost in the middle if you look at the map, in a city which is called Fulda. I was storage already 10 years, joined SUSE 4 years ago, and yeah, below you can see some interests besides the family, obviously, and my kids and my wife, doing a lot of sports, and right now doing a renovation of the old house that we bought. That's basically it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's get started. So here's the agenda. We're going to talk about, at a high level, what's new in SUSE Enterprise Storage 7. Then we'll talk about the actual beta program itself, how you can get involved and give us feedback. And then we'll talk about some technical details that you might be interested into at a deeper level. So let's get started. So this is kind of the highlights of what's in SES 7. If you look on the right-hand side, we're going to have two deployment options. So you can deploy SUSE Enterprise Storage on top of Kubernetes using Rook. So that gives you the ability to have sort of a co-located hyperconverged setup where you can run your storage and compute on the same worker nodes in Kubernetes. We're taking advantage of the self-healing scaling properties of Kubernetes. So that's option one. That's a brand new option, and we'll give you more information about that in a minute. And then we have our traditional deployment where you're deploying SES directly on bare metal with SLES. And so we're moving to a new upstream install stack based on Ceph ADM. So those are the two deployment options. From a perspective of, we're also adding in support for a new native Windows client. So what that'll enable is, it'll enable a Windows server to natively connect to block storage using the native RBD protocol. So that's going to simplify the deployment of SES with native or with Windows servers, and it will give us a performance improvement because we'll be cutting out one of the protocol layers. So you won't have to run an iSCSI gateway to be able to connect a Windows server directly into a SUSE Enterprise Ceph configuration. Also, we've been working very actively in the community to improve the day 2 operations. So there's some improvements in the Ceph dashboard, which allows you to replace disks and add disks from the Ceph dashboard directly instead of having to go down to the command line. So that's kind of an overall picture. So let's give a few more details here about what's happening. So it's always good just to have a picture of the architecture. The architecture is remaining the same. We're just basically containerizing everything for both deployment options. So you're still going to have the same thing that you've been used to as far as having OSDs, storage nodes, gateways, all the monitors. Everything is, from a conceptual point of view, still exactly the same. We're changing the packaging and deployment options, and we're adding new functionality into this release. So let's talk about the two deployment options I touched on already. So we're using the same code base for both deployment options. We're moving. We're allowing to either deploy using Ceph ADM on SLES and bare metal, so that's a non-Kubernetes deployment, or we can deploy directly on top of Kubernetes. And so the Kubernetes that we're supporting initially is the SUSE Container as a Service Platform, Kubernetes, and Rook is a Kubernetes operator that basically does the deployment and patching of the stack or of the Ceph componentry that is put down on top of Kubernetes. So from an operations and a day two perspective, the Ceph dashboard is supporting both stacks. So you'll operate, whether you operate the traditional stack or the new Kubernetes oriented stack, the Ceph dashboard is still the same day two operations interface for either stack that you deploy. So these are the two options that we have. So we're going to be offering an upgrade from our existing, from Ceph 7 with Deep Sea and Salt to Ceph ADM. So there's going to be an upgrade for that particular path. So we're going to be using Ceph ADM entirely on the new stack, and Deep Sea won't be used anymore in Ceph 7. So this new framework is really much better aligned with the upstream community, and this is going to be a base for basically additional ease of use additions in the future in day two operations. So this is the traditional stack that you've seen in the past, running containerized deployment, but it's deployed using Ceph ADM. So what does running on Kubernetes look like? So this is the deployment option 2. This is only going to be used for greenfield deployments. So we're not going to have an upgrade path that takes you from a traditional Ceph 6 deployment into a Kubernetes deployment. This will only be for new installations. So what this does is Rook is a Kubernetes operator that allows you to deploy storage applications on top of Kubernetes. So it's actually deploying Ceph with a single command, and then it also allows you to continually patch and take care of SUSE Enterprise Storage on top of a Kubernetes framework. So what we're doing is we're leveraging Kubernetes itself for some of the self-managing, self-healing, and the scaling operations. So we're taking advantage of the Kubernetes orchestration layer to help manage some of the storage operations. As you can see on the slide, it allows you to do co-location of storage and compute in a single cluster. So we'll talk about that in a minute, but that gives you more flexibility to have a single orchestrator taking care of storage and compute in the same cluster. So here's one configuration that's called a disaggregated Kubernetes with Ceph. So what that means is you're taking certain worker nodes in the Kubernetes cluster and you're segregating them and making them storage-only nodes. And then you're giving other worker nodes in the cluster, basically you're running your applications or your compute on them. So that gives you the ability to kind of dedicate storage nodes for Ceph and dedicate compute nodes for containerized workloads. So this is one option that you have. This gives you the ability to kind of secure the storage off on its own nodes and, grow and scale out your applications separately on different worker nodes within the Kubernetes cluster. So here's another option, basically co-locating the storage with the applications. So this allows you to basically mix the Ceph components on the same worker node as the applications. So this is more of a hyperconverged setup. It's not purely hyperconverged, but it's definitely co-locating the storage and the compute. So we've seen a lot of interest in this, in both of these options, for people that want to build out different appliances and they want to have the core infrastructure orchestrated by Kubernetes. So let's talk a bit about the Windows driver. So what we're doing with the Windows driver is we're building a facility where you're running a native RBD client on the Windows server itself. It gives you the ability to get rid of the gateways. I'll show a picture that kind of gives you a view of that. It also allows you to provide native block storage from Ceph to a Hyper-V guest and also to the host. We're also looking at potentially extending that from block storage to also to have native Ceph FS support as well. So this is what, on the left-hand side, you can see Ceph 6 with an iSCSI gateway. So we had another protocol layer in there. You had more to set up on the Windows server to get the iSCSI setup working, pointing to a Ceph cluster. So on the right-hand side is the new mechanism that we allow. Now, we're not discontinuing the former mechanism, but we're going to add the Windows driver, and we're probably going to be recommending this in general because it's going to be much more efficient and simple to set up. So basically, it's just like you have a Ceph RBD client in Linux, but it's on Windows, and it's the same commands to set it up. You should get much better performance. We're just working on the performance testing now, and we will have this capability at about the midpoint in the beta program. So this is going to be a much simpler, higher performing configuration that should allow you to take advantage of SUSE Enterprise Storage easier from Windows systems. So here's kind of a picture of block storage today using iSCSI. And then basically the new additions is RBD, direct block storage. Also, you can connect to a Hyper-V host, and you can also serve that same storage with the new RBD extensions to a Windows guest as well. So it's giving a much more flexible, higher performing, simpler setup for Windows servers to a SUSE Enterprise Storage cluster. So at this point, I want to turn it over to Vincent to talk about the actual details of how the beta program works. Over to you, Vincent.
Thank you, TR. So I will start with a warning. I think this should be obvious for all beta testing, but it's really important to repeat them. Of course, you should not use a beta product on a production environment. And of course, you should not migrate your production environment to the beta version we are providing. Obviously, to prevent any loss of data or any breakage that could happen in your production environment, which is really important to keep safe. So we really want you to have the perfect beta environment, so please really follow that rule. And as a reminder, this is also explained in our SUSE beta EULA, which is shared with every beta product. Last but not least, it is not supported to migrate from a beta product to a GA release, which means that it will be great if you can test Storage 7 beta, But of course, there will be no way to support the migration from your beta environment to a production environment. You will have to really migrate your production environment directly with the GA release. And this is really because of during the beta phase, there might be some leftover from your side or from our side that should not be in the production environment. But hopefully, this is not a surprise for you. Next, this simple slide really reminds you how you can get involved into the beta program of SUSE Enterprise Storage 7, and also where to find all the really important information. So first, we did announce the first public beta of storage via our blog platform at SUSE.com. So please check that out if you miss it. And second, this is really the most important webpage you should maybe bookmark right away, is really the dedicated storage beta webpage, where we list everything you should know for the beta program and for this specific version of Storage 7. In this webpage, you will find the information on how to join our mailing list, which consists of really the place where you can receive all the beta announcements, and I will talk a bit about the release cadence we will have for storage right after this slide. But by subscribing, you are making sure that you receive the announcement right away, and you can download and test all the new shiny feature we have. And also, you can discuss freely with us and our beta community directly within the mailing list. Last, of course, if you have any feedback, we have a Bugzilla setup available for the beta testing, so you can fill bugs directly or maybe feature requests for the next version directly in Bugzilla. So please make sure to visit the storage beta webpage, where you can find more details about how to join, how to get involved, but everything should be really on that page. Next, we are presenting the release cadence and schedule for the beta of SUSE Enterprise Storage 7. As you might be aware or not, we are agile at SUSE, of course, and for storage we release what we call a milestone every 2 weeks. And as you might seen from the first public beta announcement, we started the beta with milestone 12, which means that we have some confidence, and we did internally have 11 milestones already internally and tested internally. But we will provide during this beta phase 5 more milestones with roughly a 2 weeks cadence. But as a reminder, again, even the schedule is listed, the complete schedule is listed on the storage beta webpage. An important date, on the 16th of September, our beta program should really hit the feature completeness. So make sure to check that the milestone that will come around that date. Last but not least, the FCS, what we call the first customer shipment, is scheduled for October 2020. And with this, I'm handing over to Kai for some technical details you might be eager to get. Kai?
Thanks, Vincent. Hello, everyone. Let me quickly click onto the next slide. As TR already stated, one really important part, obviously, of our Kubernetes release is Rook. And with Rook, just a quick introduction, what Rook is and what it is about. Basically, to make it as easy as possible, Rook turns a distributed storage system into a self-managed and self-scalable and also self-healing storage device. So it tries to automate almost all those tasks. Also things like the deployment, the whole bootstrapping, and even more important, upgrades. So upgrades and maintenance tasks are also covered and done by Rook, I think, which is really important. Rook per se is deeply integrated into cloud native environments. So I think that's a very, very important point nowadays. And at the end, it's underneath the CNCF incubation project and also part of the Ceph ecosystem. So Ceph on Kubernetes highly relies on Rook underneath as the overall management environment. Yep. Just some quick update on Ceph ADM. Not sure if everyone heard that yet. What is Ceph ADM? Ceph ADM is yet another deployment tool, someone could say, but it's a little different because Ceph ADM deploys and manages the Ceph cluster by connecting the host from the manager daemon via SSH. And finally, we came upstream-wise to a conclusion to get to a single deployment tool. So Ceph ADM as a deployment tool will replace all the other deployment tools out there, and is the only one remaining and will be used by everyone else as well. We already see a high adoption everywhere. We get more and more feedback since Octopus was released, and this was a real great achievement. Ceph ADM itself is capable to manage the full life cycle of a Ceph cluster. So basically, it starts by bootstrapping a tiny Ceph cluster on a single node, just one monitor and one manager, and then it uses the orchestration layer underneath to do day two operations. So to expand the cluster afterwards, to include more hosts, and to provision all the Ceph daemons and services that are needed to have an up and running cluster. This can either be deeply formed on the CLI. So if you like to do this on the CLI, that's possible. But in the meanwhile, there are some tasks which are also made it into the dashboard. So we invested there heavily as well. Some improvements on the dashboard. TR mentioned some already. I prepared a demo of the dashboard as well. So if the demo cards are there with me and we have enough time at the end, let's see if I can give you at least a sneak peek of the current state of the dashboard and also the new SUSE branding. But one major improvement in the dashboard is the OSD deployment, which made it into the dashboard. So how does it look like? You can now create OSDs from within the dashboard. You can also delete them from within the dashboard, so there's no need to go back to the CLI. And you can also create and apply custom filters, which means if you have a large environment and, for example, you want to use your HDDs for your primary device, and you want to have DB on separate, let's say, flash devices, then you can define such a filter and apply it afterwards from within the dashboard. We even included a preview mode. So once you created one of those filters and you click on preview, then you get an actual preview on how this would look like before you even apply it to your cluster. I think that's very helpful for the overall deployment and also the ease of use of Ceph itself. We added a lot of bits around host deployment services. I hope we can show you some of the stuff later. Also the current smart data of this and performance data, we improved a lot. I think one looks simple, but one major improvement is also that finally what we call blinking lights made it into the dashboard. So you can select an OSD from within the dashboard, and then you can click on let the LED flash on this specific OSD, so then you can get back to data center and replace that disk. This relies on the lib storage management library underneath, so it needs to be configured properly at the beginning, but at least I think that's one big step into the right direction. A lot of improvements also went into tools. RTW, there are too many to mention. Maybe just something like the snapshot functionality made it now into the dashboard, so you can now create ZFS snapshots manually from the tree within the dashboard. You can even disconnect and evict clients that are connected. The iSCSI management improved as well. Just a minor detail, for example, is that as a safeguard, if you want to delete an iSCSI target which still have active and connected sessions, that's mainly forbidden, and you get a hint, hey, look, there are still active sessions. Are you really sure you want to delete that target? So all your clients lose access. All those tiny bits went into the dashboard for usability enhancement. For later on, it's planned to even have the whole day 2, I mean the guided installation in the dashboard as well. So after the initial bootstrapping that I mentioned with Ceph ADM, so the deployment of the first Mon and manager service, to do the rest of the installation, that's currently work in progress. Same for host removal, host adding, and all those guided upgrades. That's coming soon and on the roadmap for the dashboard. Some further Octopus improvements, just from a technical perspective, if people are interested. RGW bucket listing improved a lot. If people played or had some problem with that in the past, especially if you did some larger listings combined with some filters on top, that could be was very performance intensive and could even lead to, I don't know, a real high latency before you even get a single response out of it. That was kind of reworked, and with SES 7 and Octopus, we now push this down to the lowest layer, so down to the OSDs, and it's much more efficient now to do those bucket listings. Object recovery latency, quick sentence. Objects can now be brought in sync during recovery by just copying only the modified portion of the object. So this reduces, obviously, the tail latency during recovery. I think that's, especially for recovery situations, a big improvement. RBD also now supports mirroring of what they call, or what's called snapshot-based mode, that no longer requires the journaling feature, and it's relayed impacts in exchange for the loss of in-point consistency. So it remains crash consistent, which is very important and was a very often requested feature if RBD mirroring couldn't be applied and work on top of snapshots. Cloning, minor detail, if you clone now an RBD image, for example, it preserves the fairness. So if you configure that on the original RBD, it's present and there, and you won't, I don't know, use all the space that was initially added to the RBD. If you define 10G and you only use 1G, and you clone it, then only 1G is used and not the full 10G. Around health of the cluster was there were a lot of improvements around alerting. Alerts can now be muted just in case you're aware of a specific alert you want to get rid of, for example. You can mute it for a specific amount of time. You get now alerts for daemon crashes, which is very important. And also on top, we have some things like just a simple alert module to send emails in case something happens, and there's no need to have something else configured anywhere. So you can just enable the simple alert module and configure all the email addresses, and then you get alerts directly from the system without any third-party configuration. And with that, I think I'm through, and I think we'll hand back to TR first, right?
Yeah, let's go through a few of the questions that have popped up. So I'll get, hopefully Kai, you can help me out with some of them. But let's just, as a reminder, this is a repeat of a previous slide, just how to get involved. You know, have a look at this blog that Vincent did. It's quite good. It gives a lot of the details of the program. And the actual portal for the beta to sign up is there. You know, sign up for the beta mailing lists. Please give us feedback. We're very interested. If you find bugs, you know, please report them. Feel free to reach out to me directly if you have any other feedback around Ceph 7. We're really interested for people to try out and be participating in the beta so that we get really good feedback so that we can adjust things if there's some adjustments that need to be made. So one of the questions that was submitted was, are we going to support Ceph 7 on a public cloud Kubernetes infrastructure? So the initial support for Ceph 7, the Kubernetes deployment, it will be on a container as a service platform, the SUSE Kubernetes version. So we're not supporting currently public cloud Kubernetes. We have had some different requests to support other Kubernetes, and we would consider that. So if you have the actual use case for this, whoever submitted this, please send me an email or put your information in the chat, and I'll get back to you. But for right now, we're going to support SUSE Enterprise 7. The Kubernetes is the SUSE Container as a Service platform for now. There's a question here that says, is the Windows RBD also in the dashboard? So Kai, is the RBD volumes that are created on Windows, would they be visible in the dashboard?
So this is a little bit, this question is, let me start from scratch. So what we do have is the Windows driver, and the Windows driver is a client driver. So you run that on your Windows client to connect the RBD device instead of through, let's say, an iSCSI gateway directly, like you would do on a Linux environment, like with RBD map. You would use this driver to have direct access to this RBD device. So within the dashboard, you would just create another RBD device and share it with the client. And this time, it's just as a client, it's the Windows client. So from that perspective, there is no real difference in handling RBD devices for Linux client or Windows client.
Okay, good. Let's have a look at some of the other things. There's another question about public cloud. Will the Windows driver make it easier to consume SUSE Enterprise as block storage on the public cloud? So in concept, yes. I mean, you would have a simpler setup on your Windows VM or host. But right now, we're not actually hosting SUSE Enterprise storage in the public cloud currently. We are talking to a few partners that do some private connections to the public clouds, but right now it's not really an option. We do have some partners that host SUSE Enterprise Storage as a hosting partner, but we don't say have SES running in Azure right now, for instance. Let's have another look here. There's a question. In Ceph 6, we had the SALT scripts improve the stability and capability with each update. Have there been any substantial enhancements in the build, deploy, maintenance scripts for Ceph 7? Did we do something different there, Kai?
Yes, we did something completely different. As said, with the Ceph ADM and the new deployment tool based on SSH, the deployment now is done by Ceph ADM. We, within SUSE, built something around that to make the initial deployment and setup of your cluster easier. So you don't have to do this manually. We built a tool which is called Ceph Salt, which still relies on Salt for the initial deployment. But for the rest later on, all this functionality of updating and upgrading and also maintaining your cluster, all of that went directly into the Ceph code and is now maintained upstream and not any longer just by SUSE.
Okay, let's see. There's a question here. If a customer wants to migrate from the traditional Ceph 6 cluster to a container-based Ceph 7 cluster, how are we going to help customers migrate all the data? So to begin with, the Ceph 7 deployment, whether it's non-Kubernetes or on Kubernetes, is all containerized. So if you were going to upgrade from Ceph 7 to a non-Kubernetes Ceph 6 to Ceph 7 non-Kubernetes based deployment, that migration is part of the upgrade. So it's an in-place upgrade. If your question is, how would you move someone from a traditional Ceph 6 deployment to a Ceph 7 on Kubernetes, that would have to be a custom services engagement. We're not going to actually have the tooling to do that migration from a non-Kubernetes SES 6 deployment to a Kubernetes-based 7 deployment. Let's see. There's a question that says, is the Windows client a feature that came with Ceph Octopus, or is it SUSE developed? So do you want to take that one, Kai?
Yes, sure, I can. Currently, the Ceph Windows client is still work in progress, and we, as done today, would like to advertise it to give it some testing and to give it a try. It was developed by SUSE, but will be obviously the necessary code changes in the Ceph projects. The pull requests are already created, and under review right now. Some of them were merged, and this will be merged also into Octopus, which is different from having the client driver. So the client driver isn't part, obviously, of the main Ceph repository. This is separate and is fully developed, but still everything is open.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. We've got a couple more questions here. There's a question around the hardware. If you're using identical hardware, what's the expected range of runtime performance overhead, CPU, I/O, et cetera, if deploying with Kubernetes and Rook? So I think the question here is, what's the comparison between a traditional SES 6 deployment and what happens when we deploy SES on top of Rook and Kubernetes? I don't know that we've done any of those measurements yet. Do we have any expectation, Kai?
We have, as you said, we haven't done a lot of measurements yet. From what we saw so far, it wasn't much of an overhead. Of course, you need for, let's say, the initial runtime underneath. In our case, it would be cost. You need this, whatever they require, additionally on top. But from a Ceph perspective, yeah, there wasn't much performance overhead, at least what we saw so far.
Yeah, that's on our to-do list to give a relative performance measure between the two deployments, so that you have an idea of what the overhead or what the additional capacity you might need for the Kubernetes componentry that's basically enabling the cluster. So I think at this time, let's go to your demo. I think we have about a little bit more than 5 minutes. Maybe you could give a little short demo of the dashboard, Kai.
That needs to be a quick run through, but I'll give it a try.
Okay.
Let's see if I can screen share. Let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, I can see it.
Awesome. So this is the new login page, also with the new theme already for SUSE Enterprise 7. Let me log in real quick. Hopefully cluster is still up and running. It's running on my laptop, so it's not that fast, so hope it works. Here's a dashboard. I think you're used to that one already. The whole menu structure left from a former horizontally to a vertical in the meanwhile. That was adopted. We have a lot more menu items. I mentioned things like services, for example, where you can now drill down, let's say, in the month, and then you figure out, okay, the month service is running on node 1, node 2, node 3, and also details, which image is used, the current status. We did a lot of improvements around that. Let me quickly check, given that we only have 5 minutes. Manager modules. All those modules, the Ceph manager modules, can now be added within the dashboard, so you can modify them. Let's say click on the alert, and then you click on the added functionality. Then, for example, you can specify some configurations if you want to change them within the dashboard. Wherever we could, we added the question marks to the right. You can click on them, and you get some hint here and there. It's not, as you can see, Didn't make it into every detail yet, but it's in the works. Let me check. We have the new inventory overview, which changed a little. We had that before, but in the meanwhile, it looks a little different. And that's what I meant by, for example, we can identify. This is the blinking light feature that I meant. You can now identify those disks. Let me quickly show you that this is a real demo and not just screenshots. What could I do? I could set the pause flag, for example, on the cluster. Let me pause the cluster, which is a great idea for a demo, but not for a live environment. There was the update OSD flag. So that was done. And now in the meanwhile, hopefully, my cluster is still up and running. I get a health warning. If I click on that, I see, okay, someone set the pause flag on my cluster. So I get direct active feedback. Let me remove that real quick again to show you at least one or two other features that we've added. One thing maybe worthwhile to mention, we also invented a lot and added a lot into the user account security because that was requested several times. So if you now click on user management, let me edit the admin user. You can do things like you can set an expiration date for a password. So if when people have to renew, for example, you can even enable and disable users without deleting them. You can also set specific password complexity rules if you want that. And also, you can now change your password, for example, directly within the UI without administrator intervention. I think this is also a step in the right direction. Let me quickly check. I didn't deploy. You have in all those tabs, obviously, the performance metrics and also smart data from disks and stuff and pools. Given that this runs on my laptop, I couldn't deploy Prometheus and Grafana on top. So I couldn't show you that. So if you go on overall performance, you'll just get the information note that there's something missing. And with that, I just figured out that there are two new questions in the chat. Should we quickly handle them?
Yeah. Why don't you see if you can answer or pick one?
Yep.
I guess there's the first one is, go ahead.
Yep. What is the limitation of RBD node, SDR7 cluster capacity node? I'm not 100% sure if I understand the question correct, but I think it's just from a capacity perspective. I'm not aware of any limitation from a capacity perspective that you can put into a node. It's always depends on the use case, obviously, and you have to think about the failure scenario. So if you put too much capacity into a single node and you only deploy a few nodes and the single node goes down, the rebalancing afterwards or during this outage could have a high impact on your cluster. So that's the only thing I would like to add to that question.
So I guess the last question is, can Rook support storage class in Kubernetes if you deploy Ceph on Kubernetes? So
my initial reaction to that question was yes. I need to look it up to reach out to the engineers to be 100% sure because I don't know for sure. I will look it up and give that answer afterwards. I'm pretty sure, but don't nail me down on it.
Okay. All right, super. So we're almost at the top of our time. Is there anything else that you want to add from the demo or anything else? So the one thing that I'll do is I'll push back the one slide that just gives the details of the beta program. Grab these links. This will be recorded. You can look at it later on, but please participate, give us active feedback, and we really appreciate any testing that you do so that we can make things better for you. I think that's about it. Thank you very much for attending our webinar.